today. All right, $488 billion is bigger than the GDP of many countries, but that is just the amount of new regulation costs imposed during the Obama administration. This is according to a new study, and joining us with some of the most outrageous and burdensome examples is the study's author, Sam Batkins, director of the regulatory policy at the American Action Forum. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a really staggering number. How did you come up with this math?
Well, every day we went through the Federal Register, all the proposed final rules. It's roughly 20 to 30 regulations each day, and we just quantify or essentially write down and replicate the private sector or unfunded mandate burdens that the federal government publishes each day. So the agencies have already provided the cost estimates. We're just recording them and tallying them up at the end of each week or the end of each year.
You know, it's really amazing, and I was going through the math and I picked out some of the most egregious ones. Let's get right to it. There was something called the EPA Utility MACT regulations, which is basically the standards to limit mercury, acid gases, and other toxic pollution from power plants, which sounds like a very positive thing. It costs $10 billion, and it's predicted to force 25% of U.S. electric generation units to go offline. What is the benefit? Because that is a tremendous cost.
Well, a lot of the benefits that you see from that rule, if you look in the cost-benefit analysis, there are very small benefits, actually, from the mercury reductions. The overwhelming benefit side is the particulate matter benefits that they list. But looking through the retirements as a result of this rule, the American Action Forum has looked through roughly 100 power plants already that have announced closures. And just last week, there was a mining company that announced 1,200 layoffs. So when you add it all up, you're looking at roughly 10,000 jobs that are directly impacted. And this rule has been on the books less than a year. So they have direct employment impacts as well.
Yeah, the CMS Community First Choice option was authorized by the Affordable Care Act and provides incentives for states to expand Medicaid coverage. The implementation of this would cost $5.7 billion. Talk to me about the cost and benefit of that one. What does it really do?
Sure. The big part of the cost side on that were directly on states. If you look at the regulation, they had a direct itemized cost. Obviously, the federal government's going to spend a lot of money implementing the Affordable Care Act, but there's also a huge cost for states as well. If you look at the entire Affordable Care Act, it's roughly $7 billion just on state impacts that we found so far. And on the private sector side, roughly $20 billion. So $27 billion tab so far, and the law is still far from fully implemented. We won't see that until roughly 2014. So there's still a ways to go.
I mean, what's staggering about all these things is that when you isolate and you break out what it is, it sounds like it's a good idea and that we need regulation. But I think your point overall is that as we become regulation nation, somebody has to pay the price for this. And it's always going to be the taxpayer, the consumer. Either way, that's you and me, right?
Correct. And I think there's always this perception that regulation is only going to go after the big guys, the big utility companies, the big financial companies. But oftentimes they'll list small business impacts. We just recently did a study. We took a handful of rules, literally 10 rules, and that agencies themselves said could directly impact small businesses, mom and pop shops. And just those 10 rules was $3.5 billion. So that's 10 rules out of thousands of rules each year. So it goes from everybody to an employer of 2 to 3 all the way up to the big guys.
And people think you're regulating and passing the cost on to companies. Well, those companies pass the cost on to the consumer, or they hire fewer people. That's the problem. Thank you for coming on and breaking this down for us. It's important for people to know what's going on. We appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me.